So, whatever you want to say about the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles video game on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and I'll get to that one next year, it did garner some level of popularity and regard during its heyday, and it was more than enough to earn a few conversions over to the home computer formats of the time. Henceforth, the focus of today's subject matter is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, released in 1990 for MS-DOS. Now, this isn't the first foray in which I dwelled into the realm of NES properties converted to MS-DOS format. I've dabbled in Castlevania for MS-DOS way back in 2011, and that turned out better than I thought it would. Although still paling in comparison to the NES original, it was still a pretty decent little port if nothing else. Not something I would go out of my way to track down, but not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Of course, this isn't always the case, as games like Mega Man and Mega Man 3 have proven to be less than stellar adaptations of the more popular NES originals of the time. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on MS-DOS unfortunately falls into the latter category, as it just fails on so many levels it's almost epic in its failure, thus giving birth to the oft misused phrase, epic fail. More than likely, this version of Ninja Turtles is known primarily for a jump towards the tail end of the third area that is practically impossible to cross due to the wide gap that you'll never be able to make. Call it poor programming, call it poor level mapping, but the only way to circumvent this is to either exploit a glitch somewhere or activate a cheat that lets you pass through solid objects on the overworld map and just skip the level altogether. In fact, cheating is probably the only reason why I'm able to show you the rest of the game, because that one unjumpable jump. Oh boy, if only Nerd Boy would see this jump, he'd have a panic attack. A real one, not one of those fake, angry reviewing heart attacks. Now, it should be noted that the European version, the similarly titled Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, has an added block which makes the jump possible, but alas, if only they were able to fix the broken gameplay. In theory, Ninja Turtles on MS-DOS plays similarly enough to its NES counterpart, a typical side-scrolling action platformer where you assume control of all 4 turtles that you could swap between at any given time, and must navigate 6 areas of danger in your quest to defeat the Shredder and his evil Foot Clan in order to acquire his Life Transformer gun, the only thing that can transform Master Splinter back to the man he used to be. You'll fight a plethora of enemies such as foot soldiers, foot bandits, Mousers, and other assorted creatures that will stop you from accomplishing your goal. Each turtle plays similarly enough to each other and can attack in 4 directions, but obviously armed with different weapons which supposedly act differently. In most cases, you'll most likely stick with Donatello, whose bow staff does some decent damage compared to the rest of them. In practice, however, the game is total chaos, the apparent result of a conversion job handled by brainless monkeys who had no clues or cares about functional gameplay or quality control, or any of the elements that makes the game fun to play and worth one's time. Whatever issues lay with the NES original are intensified 1,000-fold here, and makes that game seem like a flawless gem. Control, for instance, is not fantastic. Much like the keyboard controls of Castlevania on MS-DOS, you press spacebar to attack and enter to jump. You pause by pressing escape, and you can swap between weapons or enter or exit the party wagon with the tab key. This in itself is not bad. I mean, it's not great, but it's manageable. Or you could get one of those game profiling things that maps key commands to gamepad buttons and it'll work fine. However, it's the little details that miss the mark. Jumping is a particular thing here that confounds most people on the NES, but is made worse here. For a short hop ideal for crossing short chasms in somewhat narrow spaces, you tap the jump button. For a high jump, you press the jump button. This mechanic doesn't always work on MS-DOS, and as such, one tap will sometimes enable the high jump you didn't intend on performing, which will result in you hitting a ceiling and dropping you to the ground. It tends to be an issue more often than not, especially when you're trying to cross chasms. Also, your turtle is able to attack in 4 directions, left, right, upwards, and downwards. Not an issue when grounded, but somehow nigh impossible to attack vertically while airborne. The NES original had no such issue with this mechanic. Collision detection is also pretty wonky, as it is entirely possible to be constantly barraged by enemies and killed almost instantly in short order due to the extremely short invincibility window following each hit. The NES original had short invisibility windows as well, but you still had enough time to recover. You don't get much of that here. And speaking of enemies, enemy placement is maddening at times, with screens packed full of random creatures, most of which takes multiple hits to die. There's even one room where there's an enemy right on top of the ladder that you're climbing, and it knocks you. And you're not exactly helped by the ineffectiveness of your weapons, all of which execute slowly and themselves having somewhat questionable hit detection. Your best bet would be to go for sub-weapons that'll at least give you some distance and some range. But then again, encountering these sub-weapons are a rarity in themselves since there are no spawning items, and in-level pickups are usually not as common as you progress onwards. In the NES version, whenever you kill enemies, sometimes they'll drop sub-weapons like boomerangs or shurikens and things of that nature, and you can pick these up and use them as sub-weapons. When it comes to the DOS version, these weapon drops never happen. At all. I've tried. I've never seen them. So the only way you'll come across these weapons is whenever you encounter them during the stage itself, at which point acute players of the NES game will simply go, well, that's okay, I'll go to that one building in Area 3 and grind on the almighty Ki scrolls. After all, that's the only sub-weapon I ever need. Scrolls. Yeah, nice try, pal, but no. A lot of items that you would expect to appear in their usual spots in the NES original do not appear so here. In fact, if one were to venture beyond the impossible jump through cheating means, one would find items to be extremely scarce as one progresses. The only item to be found in Area 5, as far as I could tell, is a boomerang pickup underneath one of the buildings. My first sub-weapon pickup in the entire game, by the way. In fact, the final level of the game, the Technodrome, has no items whatsoever, no pizzas or anything like that, which means once you get to that point, it's basically a gauntlet level with no hope of recovering health or sporting a fighting chance against the endless droves of enemies that become too much of an overwhelming burden to deal with. There aren't even any points where you could rescue captured turtles, which was the case in the NES version. So now you have a computer conversion of an NES game that already has a rather high challenge level, and that challenge level is augmented with poorly programmed gameplay, comprising cheap collision detection, altered enemy AI, and on top of that, you have no means of acquiring extra weapons to ease the pain a bit, and pickups become extremely rare as you progress onwards, by which point you just say fuck it and just enable the cheat mode that prevents you from taking damage. And that's no way to play a game. Cheats are something you use to maybe help out a bit, or just fuck about for a bit, but there should never be a point where you need to resort to cheats to play through the game. Not even make it through a hard part, just to continue the game. It almost makes me believe that this version of Ninja Turtles was released unfinished and needed more time to cook, not only due to the aforementioned gameplay issues and missing item pickups, but also due to the barren nature of certain rooms. Some rooms are filled with enemies, other rooms, not so much. One might call it a respite from the chaos, one might call it laziness. I call it nobody gave a shit about this game. Just about the only real positive to this MS-DOS conversion is the ability to save your game, which essentially acts like save states in an emulator. You can only save one game at a time, however, and be wary of where you save your game, lest you start off in a stage full of bad guys. In terms of presentation, Turtles fares no better. Sure, you now have more colors to fiddle around with, and as such the turtles and various enemy characters assume a more cartoonish look to them as opposed to the grittier NES visuals, but on a whole, this game is a bit of an eyesore. There are instances where characters are at least nicely drawn, such as the turtles and a couple enemies here and there, but the stage backdrops look much worse than the NES original. Almost stretched out, cramped in, Also, to add to my belief that this is an unfinished game, using background graphics for walls, brilliant. I won't even comment on the poor quality, unappealing, and outright ugly cutscenes, whether they be poorly drawn turtles or poorly rendered NES sequences, or what in the flying fuck is that thing? Jesus Christ, God. Whether you're using a sound card or the stock PC speaker noise, Ninja Turtles fares no better in the sound department either. Playing the sound with the PC speaker noise is too much pain to bear, and I swear to God, if I come across another YouTube video of this game where some yahoo is playing this with his PC speaker noise, I will channel the forces of darkness to appear before said yahoo and rip their fucking ears off. You have sound card support. Use it! But even then, all you're getting is somewhat respectable recreations of the NES original soundtrack that only sounds somewhat better audibly, but still feels like weaker melodies than the console game. Sound effects are a mixed bag, too quiet in some cases, too flatulent in others. Must have been something in the pizza they ate or something, I don't know. Oh dear lord. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on MS-DOS is the textbook example of what happens when developers who don't give a rat's ass about quality control are given the task of porting a popular NES game over to computer formats. Say what you will about the Mega Man games on MS-DOS, but you could still technically play them, which is extremely faint praise at best. This thing tosses so much stuff at a frightening pace and doesn't give you the basic skills to counter these in any effective way that it borderlines somewhere between impossible and intolerable. Yes, that impossible jump will effectively end your game outside of less than honest means, but few people would probably even get to that point in the game because it's just insufferable to put up with, due to collision detection issues, glitchy controls, the unfinished nature, and just an overall piss poor conversion job. On the bright side though, the damn level is much easier than the NES version. But then again, that's faint praise. Bottom line, stick with the NES version. It's a much better game. And no, I'm not being ironic.